Homage to the Buddha, the Dhamma and the Sangha. Today we'll be looking at the Dhammapada Verse, which is number 178. It's known as the Anathapindika Putta Vatu because it's the story of Kala, the son of Anathapindika. Now if you remember, Anathapindika was the wealthy and very well known lay supporter of the Buddha and the Sangha. So anyway, the story goes, and this is from the Dhammapada commentary, and at the end we'll go through the verse that the Buddha uttered at the end of it. So while residing at the Jetavana monastery, the Buddha was visiting Anathapindika for dana from time to time, and Kala, the son of Anathapindika, always seemed to keep away whenever the Buddha and his company of monks came and visited their house. And Kala was also not so interested in going to visit the monastery to hear Dhamma and to practice. So Anathapindika, as a good father, he was afraid that his son, if he kept on behaving in the way that he was, which is avoiding and not interested in Dhamma, that he would be reborn in one of the lower realms. And so as a way of trying to bring his son towards the path, he decided to bribe his son with money. And so he promised to give a certain amount of money to Kala if he went to the monastery and observed Sil, or, went to listen to Dhamma and so on and so forth. So Kala agreed and he went to the monastery, but in the end, he didn't end up listening to Dhamma, and he returned home early. And when he returned, his father was, quite nice to him. He offered him a meal, but instead of taking the food or maybe even conversing well with his father, he actually demanded the money. Anyway, so the next day, Anathapindika said to his son again, he thought he'd try again, Kala, if you learn a verse from the Buddha, then I'll give you like a greater amount of money than the day before. So Kala agreed, being, quite enticed by the money. He visited the monastery again, and this time he went to the Buddha and he said that he wanted to learn a verse. And the Buddha gave him a very short verse to learn by heart. And at the same time, with his powers, he had this intention that Kala wouldn't be able to memorize it. And the story goes that Kala had to keep repeating this single verse many, many times and well into the night. And because he had to repeat it so many times, in the end, he actually came to perceive the full meaning, to understand the meaning of that Dhamma. And so he attained stream entry, the fruit of stream entry. And then early the next morning, he followed the Buddha and the monks back to his own house. And as they were traveling back to his house, in his mind he was, troubled. He was feeling shameful that he had, accepted money from his father in order to go and see the Buddha. And so he didn't want the Buddha to know that he had gone to the monastery and, learned this verse for money. Now when they arrived at his house, his father was there and he offered dana to Buddha and the monks, and then he also offered Kala some food. And when his father brought out the money, Kala refused to accept it, and that was very surprising. And his father kept pressing him, pressed him again, take the money, son, but he still refused. And then Anathapindika went to the Buddha afterwards and he commented to the Buddha, my son has changed quite a bit and he now behaves in quite a pleasant manner. And then he related to the Buddha what had happened, that he had tried to bribe his son to go to the monastery and to go and listen to the Buddha and practice. And the Buddha said this verse to Anathapindika. He said, Pathabyā, ekarajjena, saggassa gamanena va, Sabbalokādhipaccena Sabbalokādhipaccena, sotāpattiphalaṁ, varaṁ. And what that translates to is soul sovereignty over the earth, or going to a heavenly place, or domination over the entire world. The fruit of stream entry is superior. And when you read the suttas, you really do find that when it comes to lay people, Buddha and the noble arahants were very, very encouraging towards stream entry, and particularly around taking refuge in Buddha, taking refuge in Dhamma, taking refuge in Sangha, and keeping a certain amount of moral conduct. And for stream entry, it's actually what they call aryakanta sila, which is the virtues or the moral conduct which is dear to the noble ones. And it actually aligns with the Noble Eightfold Path, so it's almost like a higher level of sila than what you would keep for the 5 precepts, because the 5 precepts, when it comes to speech, it limits it only to false speech. But when it comes to this noble conduct, it actually extends it to harsh speech, divisive speech, and also empty speech or frivolous speech. And there are certain ways that the Buddha actually teaches to actually hold that conduct to a higher level, to develop it to a higher level in order to enter the stream. And when you go to the suttas, when Buddha and Venerable Sariputta are talking, and the question is asked by the Buddha of Venerable Sariputta, what is the stream? The answer that Venerable Sariputta gives is, the stream is the Noble Eightfold Path. And so in order to enter the stream, one needs to actually practice, understand, develop the Noble Eightfold Path. And so the question, when it's asked, what is a stream enterer, what is a sotāpanna? Venerable Sariputta actually says this, that is one who has entered into the Noble Eightfold Path. And so when you keep the conduct according to the Noble Eightfold Path, which is right speech, right action, right livelihood, then this is what happens, that you actually develop virtues that are dear to the noble ones. And so you have the 3, physical conduct, which is the right action, which is, you refrain from killing or taking life. You refrain from taking what is not given, or you refrain from stealing. You refrain from sexual misconduct. And that's particularly true for lay people. There's a higher one for those that have ordained into the Sangha. But it's interesting to say that to enter the stream, it's just sexual misconduct. You don't have to actually refrain from sex itself to enter the stream. And then in terms of verbal conduct, it's the 4. So you refrain from false speech, you refrain from harsh speech, you refrain from divisive speech, and you refrain from frivolous speech or empty speech. And of course, one needs to understand how to develop that further, especially to develop the path. But those are the 4. And then right livelihood actually comes out of that. You don't do any kind of livelihood that particularly is harmful. And it follows in line with the actions, very much so. So when you look at it that way, it seems straightforward, and it's something to attend to. Quite often people look at stream entry and they look at the fetters that make you unbound. But in order to enter the stream, it's important to know the Noble Eightfold Path. It's very important to know that the states that you need to get to are very much around confidence, conviction towards Buddha, Dhamma and Sangha, and very much around the sila, the moral conduct. And so when you approach it simply from the fetters, you can misapprehend what the Buddha is saying around entering the stream. And so it's a very important point that in order to become, in order to realize stream entry, first the path of stream entry and then the fruit of stream entry, one needs to develop the Noble Eightfold Path. And in doing so, alongside that, what you're doing is you're developing faith and confidence. In fact, it's unwavering confidence in the Buddha and you go through the qualities of the Buddha, unwavering confidence in the Dhamma. So you know that this Dhamma, this Noble Eightfold Path, and all the other associated teachings, these are teachings that can be realized in this very life, that you can understand it right now. If you listen to the correct Dhamma, it can be understood right now. And so Buddha and the Noble Arahants, their encouragement is, come and listen now, come and attend to it now, and see for yourself. And that's where the Buddha's teaching is quite unique, that it's through examination, investigation of the Dhamma, one can actually unlock for themselves stream entry. And then when it comes to unwavering confidence in the Sangha, this is the fourfold Sangha. These are the lay and ordained people who have entered the stream, realized path and fruit, who have become once returners, realized path and fruit, those that are non-returners who have realized path and fruit, and then of course you have the Arahants who have realized path and fruit. And these are the noble ones that have gone before us, as well as the noble ones that are practicing now. And the encouragement is always with the Sangha to know that they're the ones that are practicing the good path, the proper path, the right path, and the upright path. So this is all describing really the Noble Eightfold Path. And therefore they are the ones who are worthy of gifts, offerings, hospitality, and respect. And it's important to remember that gravitating towards Sangha in terms of both lay people and ordained Sangha who are actually walking this path, that is something of benefit, because it is through associating with both lay and ordained Sangha that you hear the true Dhamma, that you are encouraged to practice the right way, encouraged in the good qualities, and of course leaning towards Nibbana. So that is something that is important. So that is why when Anathapindika was, in this instance, encouraging Kala to go to the monastery, it's because he would have been around both lay people and ordained people, but particularly the Buddha in the case of Kala, for him to associate with good people, sappurisas, and then also to hear the true Dhamma. In his case, he was fortunate to hear it from Buddha. In our case, it's also important to access the Dhamma through the suttas, that's how we hear the true Dhamma, how we link it all up. And therefore, what is in the teaching is actually yoniso manasikara, to actually discern what is the right view, what is wholesome versus unwholesome, what will uproot the taints versus what won't, and to discern the difference, and to discern that it's important to uproot the taints and to abandon them rather than to keep generating more actions that are unwholesome that would leave them there. And then of course to see the Dhamma correctly, to correct any of those wrong views that we have, and then to practice. When we're around good people, that's how we practice, and that's what happened to Kala. So it's a very powerful and very interesting story, this story of Kala, because we all have instances in the past, even instances now, where we don't want to gravitate towards the Buddha, the Dhamma, or the Sangha, where we don't want to understand what is this existence about. And so we avoid, and we do everything we can. And sometimes we do need to be enticed. It may not be because of money, it may be because of our loved ones, it may be because of food or other things in order to come to the Dhamma. But whatever it is, always remember the Buddha's words that stream entry, the fruit of stream entry, is superior, it is the best. And when it comes to his comparisons, even if you were the ruler over the whole world, if you had the power over the whole world, or if you were going to somewhere that is considered heavenly, it doesn't compare. Buddha is saying that stream entry and the fruit of stream entry is actually superior. It is the best. And that's for us to investigate. That's for us to know. And when you look at particularly chapter 5 of the Samyutta Nikaya, these are the linked discourses. There's a whole chapter on stream entry. And this is one of the suttas, Duggatibhaya Sutta, which is discourse number 15 in that chapter. And it's really about going beyond the fear of rebirth in a bad place. That when you enter the stream, that is, practice the Noble Eightfold Path, when you have this unwavering, perfect confidence in Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, and you hold and develop and maintain the virtues that are dear to the noble ones, which lead to concentration ultimately, then you go beyond any fear of being reborn into lower realms. And why is this so? This is so because you are no longer acting in the wrong way. Your conduct is wholesome rather than unwholesome. And this is particularly true because you understand that the fruit of unwholesome conduct is actually quite dire. So when you maintain wholesome conduct, you understand that the fruit of that is actually a good destination, a good result. So if you remember, you have this Dutiyasāriputta Sutta that we went through in Paṭhamamahaddhana Sutta. And we understood that when you kill, then there are results of that, bad results of that, that you will have a shortened lifespan. Likewise, when you take what is not given, then again, there are bad results. And same with the rest of them. There are bad results for all of them, all the way through to speech and what happens in our minds. So when you restrain and you refrain from unwholesome conduct through particularly body and speech, then you can enter the stream, and all this fear about being reborn into the wrong place is actually removed. And so that's one of the benefits of stream entry. And in that same chapter 55 of the Samyutta Nikaya, discourse number 44, you have the Pathamasāriputta Sutta. And this is about prosperity. And likewise, what it says is when you cultivate all these virtues and you have this unwavering confidence in Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, you're on the Noble Eightfold Path, developing it. When you possess all of this, it's said that you possess 4 things, and you will be rich, affluent, and wealthy. And this is in the context of the Dhamma, not in the worldly sense. I mean, in the worldly sense, you could be like Anathapindika and you could be actually wealthy. But his present karma was the result of his past karma. So he would have been very generous in previous lives to have been reborn as such a wealthy person in his present life. And continuing to do so would help to sustain that. But this is in the context of Dhamma that this sutta is actually saying that one is rich, affluent, and wealthy. It is because you are rich, affluent, and wealthy in something that cannot be taken away from you. So when you think about material possessions and money and those sorts of wealth in samsara, these are things that can be taken by rain, wind, fire, natural disasters basically. They can be taken through theft and wrestled away by not so good children. If you're the parent and you have a child that isn't so wholesome, they could actually manipulate you and take it away from you. But when it comes to the wealth of Dhamma, the wealth of stream entry, then this is something that cannot be taken away from you, and it can't be taken away from you at death. And so that is why the Buddha is saying this is what it means to be rich, affluent, and wealthy. There are also a number of suttas where the Buddha in chapter 13 of the Samyutta Nikaya talks about the benefit of obtaining the Dhamma eye. And the Dhamma eye is something that is obtained when you enter the stream. It's called Dhammacakkhu in Pali. And this normally means that you have started to lean towards Nibbana, and Nibbana becomes your goal. So there's a number of suttas that talk about this, and in this Nakasika Sutta, which is the first discourse in chapter 13 of the Samyutta Nikaya, Buddha compares, or he asks the monks, what is greater, the little bit of dust that he's picked up on the tip of his fingernail, or the great earth? And of course the answer is the great earth is larger, because that little bit of dust on his fingernail is so tiny. And so the Buddha says, in the same way, monks, for a disciple of the noble ones who is consummate in view, an individual who has broken through to stream entry, the suffering and stress that is totally ended and extinguished is far greater. That which remains in the state of having at most 7 lifetimes is next to nothing. It's not 100th, 1,000th, or 100,000th when compared with the previous mass of suffering. And that's how great the benefit of breaking through to the Dhamma monks. That's how great the benefit is of obtaining the Dhamma eye. And so basically the Buddha is saying that stream entry and the obtaining of the Dhamma eye is so beneficial that when you enter the stream, the maximum amount of lifetimes is only 7, and you can't go to lower realms. And so there's still suffering when you're reborn. And what Buddha is comparing it to is the whole mass of suffering for one that hasn't entered the stream, that you would have countless rebirths of suffering. That is the comparison, as opposed to stream entry, which limits it to only 7 lifetimes of some kind of suffering. And of course this suffering comes because when you are born into a body, then you're subject to old age, sickness and death. You're subject to hunger and thirst and having to urinate and have excrement. And that in of itself is simple suffering. On top of that, you add what ripens in those lifetimes. But Buddha is saying that when you obtain the Dhamma eye, when you have the fruit of stream entry, then it's limited. It's no longer that unlimited sense of suffering. And so there's 2 other suttas that are quite similar. There's one where the Buddha says the same thing, but the simile that he uses is about the water on a blade of grass versus the water in a pond. And the other one is the 2 or 3 drops of water versus the water in the great ocean. And so he uses the same kind of explanation. And so the final sutta that I wanted to just cover in this short talk is about the factors of stream entry, the ones that actually lead towards stream entry. And so this is the Dutiyasāriputta Sutta, and it's again in chapter 55, and it's discourse number 5. And I mentioned it before when we're talking about the conversation between Buddha and Venerable Sariputta. One of the other questions that Buddha asked was about the factors for stream entry. And Venerable Sariputta answered by saying that the factors were associating with good persons, hearing the true Dhamma, wisely giving attention, and practicing in accordance with the Dhamma. So these are really more the factors that lead towards stream entry. They actually support stream entry. And as we were saying before, when you associate with good persons, so this is sappurusas, these are good persons. And who are they? They are people that walk the Noble Eightfold Path. They are people that keep the precepts, whatever precepts they are. So precepts that start with the 5 precepts all the way up to Dasakusala, the 10 wholesome conduct, this Aryakanta Sila, so the virtues dear to the noble ones. It also includes, the training rules that the monks and the nuns also are holding. And it also means that these are the good people that have good qualities. So they have the qualities of faith or confidence or conviction, saddha. They have fear of wrongdoing, so this is the ottappa. They have moral shame, so this is the hiri. They have bahusutta, so they're learned, they know the teachings of the Buddha, they've heard a lot. They also have a lot of energy, so they're energetic, so this is ara, the video. They're also people that are mindful, so they have the sati. So their mindfulness is established in the 4 foundations of mindfulness. They're developing that. And then they're also wise. They have actually developed the path, that they have wisdom arising. And so these are the good persons that we want to associate with. Because when you associate with such people, they're always encouraging towards the Buddha's path, the Buddha's teaching. They're always respectful of Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha. And so when you are around them, you see them practicing, you are also thinking, maybe I should be doing that too. And then also when you're around them, you hear the true Dhamma. That's one aspect. But it's also for us as trainees, as people on the path, hearing the true Dhamma is not just associating with good people. It also means that apart from listening to Dhamma talks, we actually study. We actually start to compile what we know, increase what we know about what the Buddha and the Noble Arahants said. It's often good to start with what the Buddha and the Noble Arahants say, is because they are the ones that have perfected the path. They have actually finished off being reborn into samsara. They're no longer subject to the whole mass of suffering. So that is where you should start, the teachings of the Buddha and the Noble Arahants. And then you go to others. But it's important to know what is being said, because the suttas, the teachings of the Buddha are always correcting our view, and they're always teaching us in the right way. There are the insight pathways that give you the steps which are sequential, gradual, and it's really the Buddha's method of instruction, that if you follow the method of instruction, then you enter quickly. Otherwise what happens is there are a lot of teachings which are jumbled up, contaminated, maybe slightly polluted with other things, and so you don't get the direct teachings of the Buddha. So when you want to hear the true Dhamma, it's really you go to the actual teachings of the Buddha, the original teachings of the Buddha, one could say, and that is the fastest way to actually come closer to stream entry. And then wise attention is really this yoniso manasikara that Buddha's always encouraging through his teachings, through Sila Sutta, in particular Silavan Sutta, that's also in the Samyutta Nikaya, chapter 22. It's knowing what this is, how to wisely attend, to knowing the distinction between right view and wrong view, to knowing how important it is to abandon defilements and hindrances and not to keep breeding them. And so wise attention is very important. And then when it comes to practicing in accordance with the Dhamma, well, it is actually developing the Noble Eightfold Path in a nutshell. But when you go into it deeper, it's practicing all the insight pathways, following the method of instruction given by the Buddha and the Noble Arahants. So there is actually insight pathway in this sutta itself, when it starts with associating with good persons, hearing the true Dhamma, giving wise attention and practicing in accordance with the Dhamma. This is a small subset of the larger insight pathway that comes from the Avijjā Sutta, which we have come across and we have mentioned before, because this particular insight pathway is the wholesome one. It leads to true knowledge and liberation. The opposite of it, when we associate with the wrong kinds of company, when we avoid the true Dhamma, when we are not wisely attending and we don't practice and have the good conduct, then we are breeding more ignorance, and we are feeding that ignorance, because it's about nutriments, the Avijjā Sutta. And that is in the Anguttara Nikaya, chapter 10, discourse number 61. So, in order to round off this discussion about stream entry that talks about the story of Kala, many things come together when you associate with good people, because you'll start to hear the true teachings, sadhamma, and then you will want to wisely attend. You'll be taught how to wisely attend. It's not just being mindful, it's actually knowing the certain qualities of how we go wrong. And then you practice accordingly. If you don't wisely attend, you could be practicing the wrong path. And so that's why these things are very important to understand in a sequential manner and to follow the teachings of the Buddha. So if you want to know more about stream entry, a recent talk was given on Poya, and that was Buddha's lay advice to the lay people of Kosala, the people that lived at Bamboo Gate. And we went through the Veludvaraya Sutta, which is discourse number 55, or discourse number 7 of chapter 55, so 55.7. So there's more detail there in one of the ways of entering the stream. So we can share the merit with all sentient beings. Wishing all beings to be happy and well. Wishing all beings to be free from suffering, to find security on the path, the Buddha's Noble Eightfold Path. Blessings of the Triple Gem. Wishing you all well. Teruan Saranai.